Okay, so Marvel are famous for lacing Easter eggs throughout their movies, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is no different. However, there was actually one that could have been staring us in the face the entire time, and it's only with the release of No Way Home that we now could realise what's going on. When we visit the Spider Cave at the midpoint of the movie, we can see several Spider-Man costumes hanging up. When the film first dropped, a lot of us saw that there was a sort of switch up on the Iron Spider / Civil War suit, but knowing what we know now, we can actually see that this also looks a lot like the integrated one from No Way Home. It looks like Sony may have been inspired by the look of this suit here, and they could have pulled across a similar design for the new Webhead movie. Rewatching the movie in 2021, when I noticed this, it completely blew my mind, and there's actually way more Easter eggs in the film because of what we now know. The cave is filled to the brim with suits, and this includes the one from the PlayStation 4 and 5 game. This also appears in the end credits amongst all the red ones. To the right of it is the black rubber suit that Spider-Man actually used to fight Electro in the comics with, and he of course wears something similar to take him on in No Way Home. Now in the cave, Miles also comes across a spider suit with a red cape on it, and this pulls from the story What If Spider-Man Had Never Become a Crime Fighter. This look was referenced in What If when Peter ended up wearing Strange's cape in the zombie episode, and it's also somewhat been given a nod to in No Way Home during the chase scene through the mirror dimension. It also calls back to a moment earlier in the movie just after the bus trip when Peter B. Parker tells Miles that Spider-Man doesn't wear a cape because it's disrespectful. Next to it, we can also catch the stealth suit, which was introduced when Peter was trying to evade the Spider Slayers. There's also the Mark II, and in the cave we can catch the Spider Buggy. Interestingly, if you've seen the Across the Spider-Verse first look, you might notice that Miles has a model of this in his bedroom, kind of bringing things back to this first movie. Gwen also has Converse shoes on, whereas in Into the Spider-Verse, she's wearing ballet slippers, perhaps showing that Miles' style rubbed off on her a bit. Now the movie's post-credits scene has Oscar Isaacs playing Spider-Man 2099. In it we watch as he gets a bracelet that allows him to travel through the multiverse into any dimension at will. This is somewhat similar to the Quantum Realm GPS that was introduced in Avengers Endgame, as it allows him to hop across from reality to reality. He ends up meeting Spider-Man 67, and they have a pointing contest that references some of the best meme material ever. However, this bracelet is clearly very important, and in the Across the Spider-Verse first look, you can actually catch Gwen wearing it as she sits in Miles' room. Throughout Into the Spider-Verse, all of the Spider-Men and women had to get home because they kept glitching, but I think this device will probably stabilize them so that come the next movie, they'll be able to remain in certain realities. Now Gwen also opens up Miles' sketch pad to a totally not creepy picture of her, but on the left of this you can catch a bus ticket from the Hudson Valley Express. This was the bus that Miles got with Peter B. Parker in the movie, and it's nice that he keeps it in this pad as it clearly meant a lot to him. Peter B. Parker is of course a massive character in the film, and he and Miles meet at the grave of the Peter Parker of this universe. However, this was actually foreshadowed earlier in the movie, and in the moment when we see Miles about to start his Great Expectations essay, we can see the original book just beside his pad. On the cover of this is a man and a child in a graveyard, which of course mirrors Peter B. Parker meeting Miles later on. We can actually catch Peter B's healing factor in full effect during the scene in which he's tied to a punching bag, and if you look at his eye throughout it, you'll notice that the bruising around it disappears over time. It's a really cool little detail in it that I think shows just how much effort the animators were putting into each scene. There's also a big reveal that Dr. Octopus is a woman in this universe, but a slight nod is given to the 616 version, as during the lab plan we can see that there's a scientist that looks a lot like him. Perhaps we all need to examine our own personal biases. Now if you're enjoying the video, I'd massively appreciate the thumbs up, and make sure you hit the subscribe to stick around for Marvel videos like this every week. If this is your first time here, I'm your host Paul, aka your friendly neighborhood spoiler man. Now let's get into the rest of the Easter eggs. Okay, so the movie culminates with the Collider opening up so that Kingpin can come into contact with an alternate version of his family. Throughout this scene we get several flashes of Vanessa and his son, and one of these looks a lot like Matt Murdock, showing that in one reality his kid is Daredevil. There's also an African American version of the family, which could be a reference to the Michael Clarke Duncan version of the character who appeared as the villain in the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. Now speaking of Daredevil, there's a moment in which Kingpin and Miles fight on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. The way this location looks actually makes it seem like it was ripped right out of the intro to the Netflix show, which Kingpin was of course the main villain of. When the collider starts to activate, we can actually see on a screen that the Earth this movie takes place in is 1610. If you're a fan of the Ultimate Comics, then you'll know that this is actually the designation that universe has. Ultimate Spider-Man is where Miles made his first appearance, and he was then brought into the 616 timeline after the events of Secret Wars. Now the number 42 also appears during several points in the film, and there's a couple of reasons to why this could be. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it was said that 42 was the meaning of life, and while some fans have assumed it's a reference to that, director Peter Ramsey shut this down quite quickly. Ramsey stated that it's actually a reference to Jackie Robinson, who also wore the number 42. Robinson was the first black professional baseball player, and Ramsey stated that Miles is smashing racial barriers just in the same way that he was. Now in case you missed all the instances when 42 appears, we first see it in the opening title sequence when we can spot it on the back of the spider that eventually bites Miles. During this intro, we also get a quick cut of a lottery ball that has 42 on it, and this was actually the number that allowed Miles to get into the Brooklyn Visions Academy. When Peter Parker's death is announced, we can also see it at the subway station 4 Times Square. 42 also appears when Miles falls off a building, and upon the way down he knocks a sign which drops the numbers 4 and 2 on the ground. Lastly, it appears when Miles and Peter B. Parker get the bus, and we can see that the maximum occupancy is 42. The two versions of Peter are pretty much polar opposites in terms of personality, and whilst the one we first meet is finessed and practiced, Peter B. Parker is kinda sloppy. He's more of a falling with style kind of guy, and this is reflected in the name badges that the two have. The first Peter's seems brand new, whereas the latter is crumpled and messy, hinting towards their differences. Later, Peter B and Miles go to a fast food joint together, and Pete says that in his world this restaurant got shut down. The Peter we meet here is slightly older than the one we meet in Miles' universe, so we can guess that he's a couple of years ahead. In the restaurant, you might notice that they actually scored a C for hygiene, showing that these chumps were slowly on the way out. Now Miles' Uncle Aaron's house is filled with Easter eggs too, and in his living room we can catch a picture that hangs above the sofa. If you look closely at this, it actually seems like it has the words Prowler written in graffiti, hinting towards him being the villain. It's here that we get one of my favourite Easter eggs in a movie ever, and we can catch Community in the background on Aaron's TV. In it is the scene in which Donald Glover wears Spider-Man pajamas. Now Glover actually plays Aaron in the MCU, so this is like a weird inception of Easter eggs, with Aaron watching the multiverse version of himself in a Spider-Man costume. In Homecoming, Glover also mentioned his nephew, who we now know is Miles, and as I say, you know what I say, it's all connected. Now it's not too long before Miles talks to Gwen properly for the first time, and she stumbles over her name and calls herself Wanda. This could potentially be a nod to Scarlet Witch, who is known in the comics as being a Nexus being, aka someone who's exactly the same in every reality. Wanda is going to be a big player in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so it's going to be interesting to see if this is brought across to that film. After fully discovering his powers, Miles comes across Spider-Man and the Green Goblin duking it out. The Spider-Men end up coming face to face, which ends up triggering their spider senses. We can actually see that Miles' spider sense is initially green and purple, before it changes to blue and red, much like Peter's. Aaron's colours are green and purple, but the fact that they change shows that Miles is no longer going to be led potentially into a life of crime by his uncle, and he will instead follow in the footsteps of Peter. Peter climbs to the switch using a very special set of moves, and he manages to get to the top by holding onto the cylinders of the machine. Later on in the film, Miles uses the exact same technique to get to the switch, and though Gwen and Peter don't know where he got it from, at least we do. Now that's an amazing way to end the movie, and we close out with Miles sitting in bed whilst Gwen arrives through another doorway. We now know that this scene takes place a year after the main events of the film, and I can't wait to see the continuation of it in Across the Spiderverse. Now Into the Spider-Verse is one of my favourite comic book movies of all time, and I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on it, so make sure you comment below and let me know. We are in a competition right now and giving away 3 copies of the Spider-Man 4K trilogies on the 30th of December, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the film. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of 2002 Spider-Man, which will be linked on screen right now. Even though the movie's over 20 years old, I promise we found some new Easter eggs in it, and I'd definitely love to see you over there right after this. If not, thanks for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, peace.